Welcome back to part 2 of chapter 1 of the big book. Once again, if you got any questions, please leave it in the comments below. Yeah, don't hesitate to ask really anything. I was basically half retarded when I came into the program, so you can imagine what kind of questions I asked. Yeah, there's no stupid questions. Please jot them down below. You'd be amazed how many other people are questioning the same thing, but are too scared to ask. Okay, with that, let's jump back in. Trembling, I stepped from the hospital, a broken man. Fear sobered me for a bit. Then came the insidious insanity of that first drink. And on Armistice Day, 1934, I was off again. Everyone became resigned to the certainty that I would have to be shut up somewhere, or would stumble along to a miserable end. How dark it is before the dawn. In reality, that was the beginning of my last debauch. I was soon to be catapulted into what I like to call the fourth dimension of existence. You'll learn more about that too. The fourth dimension of existence is sort of like the new spiritual plane. There's a new spiritual life that you're going to start living in, right? And that'll make more sense after your first spiritual experience, really. Or it might even happen before that. Who am I to judge, right? I am simply a sower of the seed, if you will, by reading this. I'm not the end-all, be-all. AA talks about it doesn't have the monopoly on how to get sober. This is just one way that has worked for millions of people. So please keep that in mind as well. I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. Near the end of that bleak November, I sat drinking in my kitchen. With a certain satisfaction, I reflected that there was enough gin concealed about the house to carry me through that night and the next day. My wife was at work. I wondered whether I dared hide a full bottle of gin near the head of our bed. I would need it before daylight. My musings was interrupted by the telephone. The cheery voice of an old school friend asked if he might come over. He was sober. It was years since I could remember his coming to New York in that condition. I was amazed. Rumor had it that he had been committed for alcohol insanity. I wondered how he had escaped. Of course he would have dinner, and then I could drink openly with him. Unmindful of his welfare, I thought only of recapturing the spirit of other days. There was that time we had chartered an airplane to complete a jag. His coming was an oasis in the dreary desert of my futility. The very thing, and an oasis. Drinkers are like that. Door opened and he stood there, fresh-skinned and glowing. There was something about his eyes. He was inexplicably different. What had happened? I pushed a drink across the table. He refused it. Disappointed but curious, I wondered what had gotten into the fellow. He wasn't himself. Come on. What's all this about? I queried. He looked straight at me. Simply, but seemingly, he said, I've got religion. Don't let this scare you guys. It's a spiritual program, not a religious program. I was aghast. So that was it. Last summer, an alcoholic crackpot. Now, I suspected, a little cracked about religion. He had that starry-eyed look. Yes, the old boy was on fire, all right. But bless his heart, let him rant. Besides, my gin would last longer than his preaching. But he did no ranting. In a matter-of-fact way, he told me how two men had appeared in court, persuading the judge to suspend his commitment. They had told of a simple religious idea and a practical program of action, right? That's like maybe the part that you can kind of tie in with the religious idea, sort of. Other than that, I mean, it's mostly the idea of cleaning house and seeking God or the universe or a new spiritually guided way of life, really. That was 2 months ago, and the result was self-evident. It worked. He had come to pass his experience along to me, if I cared to have it, right? That's the idea that you'll come to, is you don't want to be giving yourself of your time to people that don't want it, right? There's millions of people that need to know about the 12 steps. and are struggling so deeply in their own anxieties and depressions and bondage when it comes to drugs and alcohol. So if you're at a place where somebody that you know really needs it but doesn't want it, don't waste your time. Keep going. Keep working with somebody else who does. You'll be so much more successful and it'll feel so much better. I was shocked but interested. Certainly I was interested. I had to be, for I was hopeless. He talked for hours. Childhood memories rose before me. I could almost hear the sound of the preacher's voice as I sat on still Sundays way over there on the hillside. There was that proffered temperance pledge I never signed, my grandfather's good-natured contempt of some church folk and their doings, his insistence that the spheres really had their music, but his denial of the preacher's right to tell him how he must listen. His fearlessness as he spoke of these things just before he died. These recollections welled up from the past. They made me swallow hard. That wartime day in old Winchester Cathedral came back again. I had always believed in a power greater than myself. I had often pondered these things. I was not an atheist. Few people really are, for that means blind faith in the strange proposition that this universe originated in a cipher and aimlessly rushes nowhere. My intellectual heroes, the chemists, the astronomers, even the evolutionists, suggested vast laws and forces at work. Despite contrary indications, I had little doubt that a mighty purpose and rhythm underlay all. How could there be so much of precise, immutable law and no intelligence? So I'm just checking to see if it's still in focus. I simply had to believe in the spirit of the universe. There you go, right? If that's where you want to start, if you're getting some issues when it comes to the idea of God, what about starting with that? Spirit of the universe. Easy enough, hey? Who knew neither time nor limitation, but that was as far as I had gone. With ministers, the world's religions, I parted right there. When they talked of a God personal to me, who was love, superhuman strength, and direction, I became irritated and my mind snapped shut against such a theory. Holy smokes, how true is that? It's like a fucking hammer to the wall. Get away from me. I think that's pretty common when people come in and they talk about God. A lot of people had really rough experiences growing up, you know, whether it has to do with Catholicism or any other sort of families who were very religious. It doesn't matter if you're Judaism, Muslim, Buddhist, doesn't matter. There's bad experiences in all of those. I think this is really important. To Christ I conceded the certainty of a great man, not too closely followed by those who claimed him. And how true is that, right? How true is this? Jesus himself, sure, amazing. That's pretty hard to deny. But then you look at the people who claim themselves to be Christian. Do they actually participate their lives in a Christ-like manner? More often not. So keep that in mind too. His moral teaching most excellent. For myself, I had adopted those parts which seemed convenient and not too difficult. The rest I disregarded. The wars which had been fought, the burnings, the chicanery, that religious dispute have facilitated, made me sick. How many people felt that way? Religion caused way more harm than help, ever. I honestly doubt whether, on balance, the religions of mankind had done any good. Judging from what I'd seen in Europe and since, the power of God in human affairs was negligible. The brotherhood of man, a grim jest. If there was a devil, he seemed the boss universal, and he certainly had me. But my friend sat before me, and he made the point-blank declaration that God had done for him what he could not do for himself. You too eventually will have that experience. You can almost guarantee it. Wait, I don't make any guarantees here. You'll probably have that experience. I have had that experience. His human will had failed. Hey, remember when it comes to the idea of alcohol, somewhat weirdly that your willpower just sort of dissolves when it comes to drugs and alcohol, but you may be incredibly powerful and gifted in other areas of your life. Doctors had pronounced him incurable. Society was about to lock him up. Like myself, he had admitted complete defeat. Then he had, in effect, been raised from the dead, suddenly taken from the scrap heap to a level of life better than the best he had ever known. Had this power originated in him? Obviously it had not. There had been no more power in him than there was in me at that minute. And this was none at all. That floored me. It began to look as though religious people were right after all. Here was something at work in a human heart which had done the impossible. My ideas about miracles were drastically revised right then. Never mind the musty past. Here sat a miracle directly across the kitchen table. He shouted great tidings. I saw that my friend was much more than inwardly reorganized. He was on a different footing. His roots grasped new soil. Despite the living example of my friend, there remained in me the vestiges of my old prejudice. The word God still aroused a certain antipathy. Oh my God, I can't even speak today, excuse me. When the thought was expressed that there might be a God personal to me, this feeling was intensified. I didn't like the idea. I could go for conceptions as creative intelligence, universal mind, or spirit of nature, but I resisted the thought of a czar of the heavens, however loving his sway might be. I have since talked with scores of men who felt the same way. You too probably felt that way, hey guys? My friend suggested that when he seemed a novel idea, hey, he said, why don't you choose your own conception of God? Note here, folks. It says, why don't you choose your own conception of God? It doesn't say choose your own God as in there's multiple gods. The God is singular, right? And it's at a place of you having your own perspective on God and like the attributes that follow and the character traits of God. I think that's really important, right? Because it's really confusing at the get-go if you're at a place of thinking that there's going to be multiple gods. I'll follow that up later. Anyways, let's keep going. That statement hit me hard. It melted the icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered many years. I stood in the sunlight at last. It's only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required of me to make my beginnings. I saw that growth could start from that point. Upon a foundation of complete willingness, I might build what I saw in my friend. That is so important, guys. It was only a matter of being willing. The willingness is so important in AA. You're going to come across times where you just want to throw in the towel, or you're so prejudiced or frustrated and you don't give a fuck about anything. Please always come back to the idea that maybe you don't know or have all the answers at the time, and they may be revealed to you tomorrow even. So this is all about persistence, right? And it starts with the frame of mind, your mindset, how you're viewing things. Thus was I convinced that God is concerned with us humans when we want him enough. At last I saw, I felt, I believed. Scales of pride and prejudice fell from my eyes. A new world came into view. The real significance of my experience in the cathedral burst upon me. For a brief moment, I had needed and wanted God. There'd been a humble willingness to have him with me, and he came. But soon the sense of his presence had been blotted out by worldly clamors, mostly those within myself, and so it had been ever since. How blind I had been. At the hospital, I was separated from alcohol for the last time. Treatment seemed wise, for I showed signs of delirium tremors. There, I humbly offered myself to God, as I then understood God. Also really important. As I then understood God. My highlighting is awful. Anyways, you get the point. to do with me as he would. I placed myself unreservedly under his care and direction. I admitted for the first time that of myself I was nothing, that without him I was lost. I ruthlessly faced my sins and became willing to have my newfound friend take them away. Root and branch. Really important, guys. When you're doing your steps, it's not about just giving a little bit of transparency. It's about digging all the way in and revealing every single stone. Every single dark cranny needs to be revealed for this to sort of consummate. I've not had a drink since. My schoolmate visited me and I fully acquainted him with my problems and deficiencies. We made a list of people I had hurt and toward whom I felt resentment. I expressed my entire willingness to approach these individuals, admitting my wrong. Never was I to be critical of them. I was to write all such matters to the utmost of my ability. I was to test my thinking by the new God consciousness within. Common sense would thus become uncommon sense. I was to sit quietly when in doubt, asking only for direction and strength to meet my problems as he would have me. Never was I to pray for myself, except as my requests bore of my usefulness to others. Then only might I expect to receive. But that would be in great measure. My friend promised when these things were done, I would enter upon a new relationship with my Creator, that I would have the elements of a way of living which answered all my problems. Belief in the power of God, plus enough willingness and honesty and humility to establish and maintain the new order of things were the essential requirements. Okay, guys, let's go back. Time for highlighting. Belief in the power of God, plus a willingness, honesty, and humility to establish and maintain the new order of things were the essential requirements. We'll tie a little bit more of that into the Oxford group. Have that in the back of your mind, the Oxford group. Simple, but not easy, right? This is where people talk about the idea of AA being a simple program. Sure, simple. It is not easy. AA is for tough motherfuckers. This is a very difficult thing to do. Nobody wants to look at the internal workings of their mind, their dark parts, or maybe the things they've left in the closet they don't want to be revealing to anybody. Nobody wants to look at this stuff. It's not easy. But a price had to be paid. It meant destruction of self-centeredness. I must turn in all things to the Father of Light who presides over us all. You notice that it was mentioned Spirit of the Universe, the Creator, the Father of Light. You know, it's not at a place where we need to get caught up on the idea of just God, right? It's the power that we're trying to touch into, not like what we call it. These were revolutionary and drastic proposals, but the moment I fully accepted them, the effect was electric. There was a sense of victory, followed by such a peace and serenity as I had never known. There was utter confidence. I felt lifted up, as though a great wind, a great clean wind of a mountaintop blew through and through. God comes to most men gradually, but his impact on me was sudden and profound. For a moment, I was alarmed and called my friend, the doctor, to ask if I was still sane. He listened in wonder as I talked. Finally, he shook his head, saying, "Something has happened to you I don't understand, but you had better hang on to it. Anything is better than the way you were." The doctor now sees many men who have such experiences. He knows that they are real. While I lay in the hospital, the thought came that there were thousands of hopeless alcoholics who might be glad to have what had been so freely given to me. Perhaps I could help some of them. They in turn might work with others, and that's exactly what I'm doing this for, guys. Right? And this is sort of like the divine inspiration of it all. Right? Suddenly here, guys, so I shouldn't have underlined this part. The thought came Where do you think thoughts come from? Do you think that was just like his own brilliant creation that he should go invest a bunch of his time helping other people? No, you're a selfish alcoholic. All you care about is yourself. This is the divine intervention. Your thoughts, right? Your thinking is going to change. That's where you'll notice God coming and working in your life. You'll notice God working through other people to give you a different perspective. That perspective helps you, the way you approach life, the way you see things, the way things that impact you. That's where you'll see God will be working in your life, right? Not a lot of us have that idea of that burning bush, right? God comes to most men gradually. Just, he had sort of a burning bush moment. Lucky him. I'm kind of jealous, actually. My friend had emphasized the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all my affairs. Particularly, it was imperative to work with others as he had worked with me. Faith without works is dead. That is from the book of James, FYI, if anybody wants to understand where that saying comes from. It's pretty common. Faith without works is dead. Book of James, New Testament. And how appallingly true for the alcoholic. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life, remember guys, this is really important. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and selfless sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. How true is that? The longer you stay in the program, the more you'll see people relapse and they don't come back because they die. Overdoses. I mean, God, I've seen somebody in a hospital where all their organs shut down, and it is terrifying. Can't even speak. It's like the whole person is gone, and they're just like this. Oh God, it was a terrible experience. But you too will experience that. That's what alcohol does. People with addiction and alcoholism will kill themselves through drink and alcohol. It's crazy, it's insane, but that's what happens. If it did not work, he would surely drink again, and if he drank, he would surely die. Then faith would be dead indeed. With us, it is just like that. My wife and I abandoned ourselves with enthusiasm to the idea of helping other alcoholics to a solution of their problems. It was fortunate for my old business associates remained skeptical for a year and a half, during which I found little work. I was not too well at the time and was plagued by waves of self-pity and resentment. This sometimes nearly drove me back to drink, but I soon found that when all other measures failed, work with another alcoholic would save the day. Work with another alcoholic would save the day. So you see what I'm saying? This is when people are recovering, and they're recovered alcoholics, they're recovered from a hopeless state of body and mind, right? It doesn't mean the idea of coming back to the bottle doesn't surface. It doesn't mean that you're going to go through tough times of feeling depressed and wanting to throw in the towel. But guess what saves the day? Work with another alcoholic. Many times I've gone to my old hospital in despair. On talking to a man there, I would be amazingly lifted up and set on my feet. It is a design for living that works in rough going. We commenced to make many fast friends, and a fellowship has grown up among us, of which it is a wonderful thing to feel a part of. To feel a part. The joy of living we really have, even under pressure and difficulty. I've seen hundreds of families set their feet on the path that really goes somewhere. Have seen the most impossible domestic situations righted, feuds and bitterness of all sorts wiped out. I've seen men come out of asylums and resume a vital place in their lives of their families and communities. Business and professional men have regained their standing. There is scarcely any form of trouble and misery which has not been overcome among us. In one western city, and its environs, there are 1,000 of us and our families. We meet frequently so that newcomers may find the fellowship they seek. At these informal gatherings, one may often see from 50 to 200 persons. We are growing in numbers and power. An alcoholic in his cup is an unlovely creature. Our struggles with them are variously strenuous, comic, and tragic. One poor chap committed suicide in my home. He could not or would not see our way of life. There is, however, a vast amount of fun about it all. I suppose some would be shocked at our seeming worldliness and levity. But just underneath, there is deadly earnestness. Faith has to work 24 hours a day in and through us, or we perish. Most of us feel we need to look no further for the utopia. We have it with us right here and now. Each day, my friends, simple talk in our kitchen multiplies itself in a widening circle of peace on earth and goodwill to all men. Awesome. That is chapter 1, guys. Here's a fun little tip for you. How many times have you been in a meeting and you hear people at the end of the share saying, oh, I wish you guys another 24. I'll take a 24 for myself, blah, blah, blah. And what that actually comes from is this. Faith has to work faith has to work 24 hours a day in and through us, or we perish. It's not like you can just take time away from your disease and addiction. The freedom comes from adjusting your mind and your sights to a spiritual way of life, right? The faith, the connection. That's what you need to focus on. So I wish you guys faith. And I hope to see you guys on the next video as we go through the start of chapter 2. Go take a break, guys. Thank you for listening. You're worth it. I'm proud of you for even making it through the first chapter.